Detective recap here. Today, I'm going to explain a drama history film called Goya's Ghosts. This highly fictionalized movie follows the different entanglements of Francisco Goya, one of Spain's most important artists. From inhumane tortures to absurd public persecutions and executions and to spiraling sanities, the story bears the same dark, grim, and terrifying qualities that many of Goya's artworks carry. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. It is said that history is written by the victor, but it doesn't end there. Those in power can shape what truth and evil are, and Francisco Goya knows this well, so he paints. In Madrid, the Holy Office of the Spanish Inquisition holds a meeting. There, they discuss Francisco Goya's disturbing images spreading throughout the world. The Inquisitor General calls brother Lorenzo, asking if Goya is the one who's painting his portrait. After confirming this, Lorenzo calmly defends Goya, claiming that he's considered the greatest painter in Spain. Unconvinced, the Inquisitor General mentions that his images are disturbing, but Lorenzo retorts that they merely reflect the world they're living in. Lorenzo emphasizes that they must focus on the heretics surrounding them, and for that, he volunteers to lead the church more viciously by severely punishing these blasphemers. As artists tend to be messengers of their time, Lorenzo makes a compelling argument that Goya's works are depictions of the world surrounding him. This is why freedom of art and expression is a cornerstone of personal liberty. However, Lorenzo is also using Goya's works to fuel the persecution of the heretics. He argues that the evils Goya's works depict will not disappear if the artists were hunted, so it is up to them to send the heretics to the stake and reform the nation back to its God-fearing ways of the past. Meanwhile, in his home, Goya paints a portrait of Inés Bilbachua as she asks why a certain painting in Goya's home has no face. Goya tells her that the painting is of a ghost, making Inés laugh before they start talking about ghosts and witches. Later that day, Lorenzo arrives at Goya's home so Goya can finish his painting of him. While Goya paints, Lorenzo notices his portrait of Inés, asking him if he's ever tempted to be intimate with his female models. Goya laughs this off, asking instead if Lorenzo wants to have his hands included in his portrait. To this, Lorenzo adds that it would be unwise to have many powerful enemies, and Goya simply answers that it's a good thing he has a few powerful friends as well. Hours later, Goya meets with King Carlos IV and Queen Maria Luisa in the royal palace to paint a portrait of the Queen. Back in the Holy Office, Lorenzo is reminding the monks of some covert blasphemous acts. If someone claims that matter consists of atoms, he's a heretic. If a man hides his manhood while he's urinating, then he's a Judaizer. With that, Lorenzo stresses that they must be vigilant when tackling teachings contrary to the Church's doctrines. While Lorenzo's instructions are guaranteed to catch them a heretic, they also lend themselves to false accusations. Labeling these activities as covert acts of blasphemy undermines the individual person and disregards personal choice. Ultimately, this is what happens when you employ radical means to achieve radical goals. Later that night, some monks stay inside an inn, carefully observing the activities there. This is when they notice Inés refusing to eat a serving of pork. The monks then carefully watch her as she starts lining up to kiss a dwarf's foot, and they take note of her suspicious activities. The next day, Inés' father, Thomas Bilbachua, receives a letter from the Holy Office, summoning Inés to them. This confuses Inés, and she, along with her family, wonders if she had done anything sacrilegious. A few days later, Inés reluctantly proceeds to the Holy Office. The monks interrogate her about what she did and ate in the inn, and Inés explains that she ate chicken because she doesn't like pork. Unsatisfied, the monks ask her if she's willing to prove her innocence, and she readily accepts their challenge. Shortly after, the monks take Inés to a lower chamber. They put her through the question, a form of torture whereby her arms are suspended in the air. As Inés screams in agony, the monks continue their interrogation, informing her that they have reason to suspect that she's secretly Jewish, even though the girl doesn't even know what a Judaizer is. Inés desperately pleads for her innocence, but the monks stand firm with his demands for her to tell the truth. Unable to handle the torture anymore, Inés desperately pleads him to tell her what the truth is. In this radical crusade, torture is nothing more than a tyrant's tool of the trade. Inés's question is very telling, they are the ones dictating what the truth is, not her. Pain and torment cloud the judgment and weaken a person's will, and most will succumb just to make the pain stop and keep their limbs intact. Again, scrutinizing people's personal and inconsequential choices with the intention of passing extreme judgment completely undermines them and corrodes their agency. And torturing the supposed truth out of these people only adds to the inhumanity of it all. Meanwhile, Thomas meets with Goya. The man asks him to speak with Lorenzo immediately so that they may know where Inés is. Confused, Goya tries telling Thomas that he is in no position to do anything about the Inquisition. Though Goya is firm in saying that he can't talk to the Holy Office if it doesn't involve him directly, Thomas still begs Goya for his help. The morning after, Lorenzo returns to Goya's home to view his finished portrait. Goya proudly unveils it to Lorenzo, who compliments the masterful piece. When Lorenzo asks about the payment, Goya tells him that Thomas Bilbachua has already taken care of it. He proceeds to speak highly of Thomas and how rich a merchant he is before mentioning Thomas's request about Inés' arrest. Meekly silencing himself, Lorenzo accepts the invitation to dinner at the Bilbachua's home. Making his way to Inés' prison, Lorenzo walks past numerous miserable heretics, wasting away after arrested by the church. Eventually, he finds Inés bare on the floor. He immediately covers the fearful girl with his robe then offers to help her. Despite her pleas for help, Lorenzo can't do anything so he offers to relay a message to her family, instead. Relieved, a tearful Inés asks him to tell her family that she loves him. At Lorenzo's offer, they pray together, with Ines taking a frantic tone as she does while Lorenzo loses his focus as he eyes her bare body. It isn't long before he starts holding Ines close and intensely touches her body while promising he'll take care of her. Evidently, Lorenzo's a hypocrite. He condemns extramarital salaciousness and upholds celibacy, yet he's indulging in Ines' body. Lorenzo even uses prayer as an excuse for him to touch the girl. This only shows that Lorenzo is infallible because he isn't some celestial mouthpiece, nor is he the torchbearer of religious reformation. He's human, and he's one who is on the cusp of taking advantage of a vulnerable girl. Later that night, Goya and Lorenzo meet with the Bilbachua family in their home. At the table, Thomas offers a toast to his bountiful donation to the church, and they exchange pleasantries before proceeding to business. Lorenzo reveals that Ines must stand trial for being supposedly Jewish, and only then can she come home. Shocked, the family questions the church's judgment, but Lorenzo cuts them off, saying that according to the church's archives, their family is of Jewish descent. As Thomas starts claiming that only he knows of their Jewish roots, one of the sons interrupts them to ask if Ines was put to the question. To the family's horror, Lorenzo bluntly confirms this, and Thomas questions the church's decision to use such medieval means of justice, which he thought was already abandoned. Lorenzo defends the use of the question, reiterating that it is a necessary tool considering their wicked times. Goya abruptly joins the conversation, jokingly saying that anyone would admit to anything if they were put to torture. Again, Lorenzo firmly denies this, but Goya tells him in a more serious tone that pain can obscure one's senses and make them confess to anything to avoid it. To this, Lorenzo simply claims that if you were a God-fearing man, then God would give him the strength to withstand pain. With a smile, Thomas asks Lorenzo if he was certain that God would grant him the fortitude to deny an absurd allegation like being a monkey when tortured. Confused, Goya tries lightening the mood, but Thomas suddenly walks out of the room. Though Thomas presents himself as a light-hearted and jovial man around Lorenzo, there is a sinister undercurrent to him. He doesn't seem like a man who is naturally humorous, and his son even confirms that his father has no sense of humor. However, with Lorenzo maintaining a steely and unbothered demeanor amidst the stifling atmosphere of the room, he may very well believe that God will grant him the fortitude so long as he is righteous. But if anything, Lorenzo's firmness shows his dedication to rid the country of the apparent evil is fairly absolute. It isn't long until Thomas returns, and he reads Lorenzo an absurd letter. It details a confession written on Lorenzo's behalf that he's a chimpanzee-orangutan hybrid whose sole reason for joining the church is to destroy it from within. Shock fills the room as Thomas happily asks him to sign it. Goya tries to lighten the mood again, but Thomas coldly stops him and orders the door to be blocked. When Lorenzo tries leaving, the men there seize him upon Thomas' orders. Goya's attempts at forcing Thomas to release Lorenzo are futile as he is forcefully escorted out of Thomas' home. Afterwards, Thomas has Lorenzo put through the question. The man is tied by the chandelier, and Thomas coldly watches him suspended in the air. Lorenzo screams in agony before eventually giving in to Thomas' orders. He signs the letter that Thomas wrote earlier, and finally, he leaves the house with Thomas's supposed donation to the church. When you spend so long at the top being an untouched figure of power, authority, and righteousness, it's easy to be out of touch with reality. And when you're not in tune with how people actually work and live, it's equally easy to adopt ignorant beliefs and make ignorant decisions. But now that Lorenzo's had a taste of his own medicine, one can hope that he realizes that the very foundation of their crusade isn't as infallible as he thought it was. After this, Lorenzo immediately meets with the Inquisitor General. He gives him Thomas' donation before informing him of Thomas' request for his daughter's release. But the Inquisitor General only accepts the money while rejecting his pleas. He claims that releasing her would contradict the principles of their faith, since that would suggest that the church doubts the power of the question. Disappointed, Lorenzo returns to Ines and informs her of his meeting with her father. Lorenzo assures her that her message was delivered before swaying her off by praying with her. As they pray together, Lorenzo starts touching her intensely again, slowly disrobing her as he breathes heavily. As for Ines' family, they ask for the help of the king himself, who laughs at the foolishness of Lorenzo's confession. Thomas points out that anyone will confess when put to the question, and the king only tells him that he'll see what he can do. Meanwhile, in Goya's home, monks suddenly arrive. Because of Thomas's letter, the monks inform Goya that Lorenzo's fled and is now a fugitive, and that they must confiscate his portrait of Lorenzo immediately. Goya obliges, letting them take the portrait away. Later, in the center of the town, a monk burns Lorenzo's portrait as he publicly denounces Lorenzo, threatening eternal damnation to anyone who even speaks his name. From the crowd, Goya watches his painting burn before his ears start ringing at the sound of the bells tolling. As the proud likeness of Father Lorenzo burns into nothing, we are reminded that he is being condemned by a unit that undermines the people in favor of their war against the unholy and in favor of maintaining the image that they are indisputable. Both the Inquisitor General and the king must have realized their error, but neither of them see it fit to adjust their ways. Hubris is a dangerous thing, and once man aspires to judge and punish as God does, then how is he any better than the very heretics he condemns? The next day, Goya proudly presents the queen's portrait to her in the royal palace. However, the queen looks in disgust as she stares at her appearance, finding the likeness of her hideous, before storming out of the room. Shortly after, King Carlos calls Goya to his chamber, but before they could actually talk about why Goya was summoned, a messenger suddenly arrives. He informs King Carlos of the death of King Louis of France. Upon hearing this, King Carlos is filled with grief, and he slowly walks out of his room. 15 years later, Napoleon Bonaparte and his generals meet as they prepare to liberate Spain from its tyrannical rule. At Napoleon's command, the French army wreaks havoc in Madrid, brutalizing the Spanish as they tear their way into Spain's capital. While the invasion rages on, a now deaf Goya stands inside his house. He watches the fires of the French army as the images of war are permanently engraved into his mind. Though his hearing is gone, he is thankful that his vision remains, so he can record all that he's witnessing through his drawings. Despite his titular role, Goya is a bystander in his story. He's more active than most, but a bystander nonetheless, and that suits him just fine. After all, Goya is an artist. He's a painter who concerns himself with capturing people and events as they are, and as long as his work exists, everything he records is immortalized. It's as hopeful as it is tragic. The next morning, the Inquisitor General is holding a mass at the church when a French general suddenly storms inside. He abolishes the Spanish Inquisition, resulting in the release of all of its prisoners. Shortly after, a pale and sickly-looking Inés is finally free, and she walks along the streets of Madrid while watching numerous prisoners reunite with their loved ones. However, this also comes with watching the fallen bodies caused by the French violence. Eventually, she reaches her family home, and upon making her way upstairs, she sees the bloodied and lifeless bodies of her family. Inés gently caresses her mother's hand, and she stares at the bodies in grief before heading to Goya's home. Goya answers the door when she knocks, and he mistakes her for a beggar. He gives her some coins to make her leave, but she stays. Annoyed, Goya tries telling her he's deaf, but he soon realizes that she is Inés. Coming to his senses, Goya quickly gets her inside and gives her some food. He then asks her to write her experiences on a piece of paper, where he learns of the horrors Inés endured throughout her time in prison. Inés writes about her daughter and about wanting to see her, and Goya is surprised to discover that she had a child in prison. She then asks him to help her find her daughter, and Goya carefully thinks about Inés' claims. The next day, Goya sets out to search for any remnants of the Spanish Inquisition, hoping that they could help him find Inés' daughter. The years have been unkind to Inés, and time continues to show her no mercy. The system that trapped her failed her when it unrightfully imprisoned her, and it continued to fail her when it gave her false hope of a trial that never happened. And now that the same system has collapsed, it took her family with her. But if there's a silver lining to this horrific madness, the same collapse is what led to her freedom, and she now has a chance to be with her daughter. And after failing to save her once, Goya must be determined to see this through. In Goya's search, he eventually finds himself in the trial of the Holy Office of the Inquisition. From the crowd, he is shocked to find Lorenzo working for the French. Goya listens on as Lorenzo preaches about the French Revolution opening his eyes and them being logical, just, and universal. Finally, Lorenzo declares that all men are born free and those who refuse to see the light of liberty shall receive no mercy, for he shall not tolerate the enemies of liberty. Lorenzo then judges the Inquisitor General, sentencing him to death while the crowd cheers on. At first glance, Lorenzo seems like a completely different man, and in some ways, he is. He now preaches doctrines that contradict the Church's teachings, and he is now a man who clings to logic, reason, and liberty. But beyond his change of beliefs, Lorenzo remains consumed and overwhelmed by his own fanaticism, only this time, it's political instead of religious. When Lorenzo recognizes Goya in the crowd, he greets him, then takes him to his office. Inside, Goya discusses Inés' concerns to Lorenzo, telling him of her supposed daughter. Lorenzo enthusiastically orders her to be brought there, and he goes on about how he owes everything to Inés' late father, for he drove him to flee to France where he saw the error of his ways. Shortly after, Inés arrives, and she rushes to Lorenzo to kiss his hands while he tries to stop her. With the help of his interpreter, Goya listens on as Inés asks Lorenzo how their daughter is. This bewilders Lorenzo, and he asks why Inés would think they have a daughter. To this, she claims that he's the only man she's ever known and that they took her baby away from her before she could even drink from her milk. To soothe her, Lorenzo gives Inés to a French soldier, who he promises will take her to her daughter. Relieved, Lorenzo returns to his table before Goya asks him where Inés will be taken. Lorenzo assures him that she'll be taken somewhere safe and states that her senses have been heavily damaged by her time in jail, making the child a figment of her imagination. Though Lorenzo's already severed his ties with the Church, he still can't admit to ever touching Inés. He only turned away from religion when he was in France, so if he were to take responsibility for what happened to her, then that would be the same as confessing that he disavowed his pledge to celibacy as a priest. While many things can be said about Lorenzo, he still projects the image of a man who believes wholeheartedly in what he stands for, and he must want to keep it that way. Afterwards, Lorenzo makes his way to the Inquisitor General's prison cell to ask him what happens to children born inside the prison. The Inquisitor General cautiously asks him if it concerns his child, but Lorenzo requests that they stick to the question. Before answering, the Inquisitor General asks Lorenzo to promise him that if he answers, he will let him die in peace. Lorenzo agrees to this and listens to what the Inquisitor General has to say. After their meeting, Lorenzo heads off to a convent where he asks the nuns there for a child fitting the description of Inés' daughter. With disappointment, the head nun tells him that she ran away when she was 11 years old. Lorenzo then calmly asks more questions about Inés' daughter before eventually learning that her name is Alicia. Meanwhile, in the Pardo Gardens, Goya is drawing by a bench when he suddenly sees Alicia with an older woman. He then rushes to her before stopping as he sees her enter a carriage as an escort. In consolation, Goya walks up to Alicia's companion to ask for her name. It's such a glaring coincidence that Goya just so happens to catch Alicia out in the wild now that both her parents are back. Still, there's no doubt that Alicia is her mother's daughter. Their faces look like perfect replicas of each other's that one might even wonder if they're the same person. The next day, Goya meets with Lorenzo, and he requests to meet Inés immediately. He informs him that Ines' claims were true and that she does have a daughter. Dumbstruck, Lorenzo asks him how he found out, but Goya only tells him that he saw Alicia, a girl who looks exactly like Ines. Unconvinced, Lorenzo asks where he saw Alicia. Goya says that he saw her by the gardens, surprising Lorenzo as he realizes that Alicia is working as an escort. Goya then requests to have Ines at his house, and Lorenzo agrees to this before heading out to meet with Alicia. In the gardens, Lorenzo picks Alicia up and asks her questions about her childhood. Alicia tries to seduce Lorenzo, but he pats her away, telling her that he just wants to talk to her. He even gives her a proposition to leave Spain. Alicia angrily declines, asserting that she'll scream if Lorenzo doesn't stop, but Lorenzo doesn't heed her warning. Alicia eventually screams, alerting the people around them, and she storms out of the carriage. Unfortunately, Lorenzo has no intentions of getting to know his daughter. He doesn't even intend on reuniting Ines with her. As they are, both Ines and Alicia are thorns in Lorenzo's side, and they're liabilities that he has no intention of letting loose. While Lorenzo isn't one to display outward bursts of evil, he's a man who's wholly capable of cruelty and disregard for others as long as it suits him. Later, in Goya's home, Lorenzo tells Goya that bringing Ines and Alicia together would only cause problems for them as they both aren't in the right state of mind. However, Goya thinks otherwise, so he asks where Ines is being kept. But Lorenzo only ignores his question and demands to know why Goya is so obsessed with her. In retaliation, Goya claims that he sees her everywhere he looks and that he doesn't want to abandon her again. Calming down, Goya asks Lorenzo where Ines is again, but Lorenzo still refuses to answer, telling Goya that she's crazy. From there, Goya bursts in anger, and he grabs Lorenzo by his shirt while demanding him to reveal her whereabouts. Finally, Lorenzo gives in, and he tells Goya that she is at a mental institution. Once he arrives, he meets with the director. The two then argue about Ines, bargaining about how much they'll pay for Ines' freedom before settling on a deal. They then move inside, searching for Ines when suddenly, a commotion occurs. One of the female mental patients steals Ines' imaginary baby, so Ines chases after the woman. Ines moans angrily as she tries grabbing her imaginary baby before Goya screams out for her, silencing the whole room. Goya then tells her that he's found her daughter, which finally calms Ines down. With that, they leave together. Though others may be quick to dismiss Ines as a lost cause, Goya is adamant to make things right for her. Goya has painted angels for La Florida Church, and the angel descending there bears Ines' face because she was one of his muses, his models. And it eats away at him that the very object of his art, his lifeblood, suffered and wasted away while he wasn't able to do a thing. And now, he refuses to abandon her again. Not when her life is the only one he can change now in these tumultuous times that's left everyone a victim or a helpless witness. Later that day, Goya heads to an inn where he finds Alicia caring for a baby. He introduces himself, and he promises the girl that he will introduce her to her mother. Just as Alicia is responding to Goya's proposal, French soldiers suddenly raid the bar, causing a wild ruckus. They arrest Alicia and the other escorts, moving them away to be deported to America. After the commotion, Ines walks into the inn and finds the baby that Alicia was holding earlier. Thinking that it's her lost daughter, she holds the child and stares at her lovingly while walking away. Hours later, Goya confronts Lorenzo, asking him if he ordered the deportation of those women to America just so he could get Alicia out of the way. Unflinching, Lorenzo claims that what he did was the best thing for those women. When Goya incredulously challenges if being sold as a slave in America really was the best thing for them, Lorenzo calmly asserts that Spain as they knew it was a brothel that cared little for ideals, and it was better than staying there. Suddenly, Goya's ears start ringing while Lorenzo berates Goya because unlike him who always believed in what he was doing, Goya worked for anyone who paid. To call Lorenzo a mere believer would be an understatement. He's criminally zealous in whatever side he stands by, and his cold ambition and thoroughness have gained him massive success and reverence in all the roles he takes. This makes Lorenzo all the more terrifying. Though he's not the portrait of a vile villain committing evil and atrocities, he's more than capable of doing these without even blinking because he is wholly convinced of his own righteousness. Lorenzo lives to pursue evil, condemn it, and eradicate it, and while his targets have changed, his radical ways are ever present in him. A French soldier interrupts them. He informs Lorenzo that the British army allied with the Spanish resistance and they are now advancing to Madrid. Lorenzo rushes out as he realizes the imminent danger approaching them, and he puts his family into a carriage before riding out to escape. Shortly after, Goya stumbles upon Ines holding her new baby. She surprises Goya as she tells him that she doesn't want the baby to cry when she meets her father, Lorenzo. Meanwhile, the group of soldiers with Alicia are moving along the road when suddenly, a battalion of British soldiers ambush them. They kill every Frenchman there before taking Alicia and the rest of the escorts for themselves. As this happens, Lorenzo is still escaping with his family. But as they're fleeing, Spanish rebels surround them, and they take Lorenzo hostage. Later that night, members of the Spanish resistance free the Inquisitor General before they proceed to have a trial for Lorenzo. As Lorenzo blankly sits in the middle of the courtroom, the Inquisitor General enumerates Lorenzo's numerous heresies before sentencing him to death. However, the Inquisitor General reiterates that if Lorenzo repents, he will be able to live the rest of his days in the mercy of God. Lorenzo coldly raises his head, maintaining a deathly silence as he declines the church's offer. If one were to commend Lorenzo, then it would be for his firm and unwavering convictions. Despite his mistakes, Lorenzo's never taken back the core of what he preaches for as long as he stands by them. So even if these very convictions are what will lead him to his death, then so be it. But this is a far cry from the Lorenzo who confessed to being an animal while put under torture. Perhaps he has grown more indomitable over the, or perhaps torture is simply an ineffective method. Later, in front of the royal palace in Madrid, members of the Holy Office escort Lorenzo out. The crowd receives him with mixed reactions, with some shaming him while others are imploring him to repent. As they reach the stage, the monks place Lorenzo on a garrote. They keep urging him to repent to avoid eternal damnation, but Lorenzo remains silent. Suddenly, the Duke of Wellington, who is the leader of the British Army, walks into the palace balcony. As Lorenzo, fading away and frothing at the mouth, scans the balconies, he sees his daughter Alicia upon one of them, smiling as a British soldier holds her. Finally, the Duke signals for Lorenzo's death. From the crowd, Ines foolishly calls on Lorenzo, trying to show him their supposed baby. Lorenzo manages a smile before he is put to death. Afterwards, the monks put Lorenzo's body on a cart pulled by a mule while Ines tries following the cart's path. Seeing Ines, Goya follows her while she catches up to Lorenzo's cart. When she does, she witlessly holds onto his dead hand as she enjoys a twisted version of their first moment as a family. Goya tries to stop Ines one last time, but Ines simply smiles, and she walks away with children singing around the cart. Goya's ghost is intended to depict the absurdity of historical trials which were spearheaded by the hypocrites and the sanctimonious who saw no problem committing bloodshed in the name of their faith. As the director put it, we come to see that evil comes dressed in different guises. The evil in the film wasn't merely contained within one sector, you could see the wrong and vile ways of every active participant. The director also intended this to be a commentary on how the blind fanaticism towards certain powers consume not just the victims but also its executors. As the film showcases, the zealous subscription towards totalitarian regimes and the radicality that comes with them is usually just a subscription to a digging service for your own grave. The impact it can have on people is profound, and it can still be felt even after the turmoil and it's time to act normal again. This is shown in the way Ines, now too far gone, walks into the sunlight with her farce of a family, and Goya, the titular character, can only follow her and watch, just as he's been watching everything unfold, unable to do anything else but draw, record, and reflect. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.